In a pristine Boston high-rise, a marketing executive surrounded by thousands of dollars in wrapped gifts was about to discover that money couldn't buy what she wanted most. What started as her annual Christmas shopping triumph took a devastating turn when she came face to face with a text that would redefine everything she thought she knew about family. Sarah Mitchell wasn't your typical successful daughter. For 15 years since leaving small-town Millbrook, she had spent her life proving her worth through increasingly elaborate gestures, known for transforming every family gathering into a showcase of her professional success and financial generosity. When she encountered her mother's matter-of-fact message dismissing her from Christmas, she had no idea she was facing the collapse of her entire emotional strategy. Sarah responded with wounded fury about her expensive gifts that would lead to a brutal awakening about the difference between performing love and living it. What began as a holiday exclusion would become a complete dismantling of her relationship with family, success, and self-worth. The Mitchell household would never be the same after Sarah was forced to confront whether she was a beloved daughter or simply a well-meaning stranger who happened to share their DNA. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Mitchell's fingers moved with practiced precision, folding the corners of expensive wrapping paper around a cashmere scarf that had cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. Her laptop screen glowed beside her on the coffee table, displaying the final edits to a campaign proposal that was due first thing Monday morning. December in Boston meant juggling holiday preparations with year-end deadlines, and Sarah had perfected the art of multitasking her way through both. The Tiffany bracelet for her sister Jessica lay in its iconic blue box, waiting for its turn. The custom leather jacket for her brother Michael hung on the back of her chair, still bearing the tags from the boutique in Back Bay for her parents. She'd chosen a weekend getaway package to the White Mountains, complete with spa treatments and fine dining reservations. Every gift had been carefully selected, meticulously wrapped, and would be delivered with the kind of flourish that had become her signature at family gatherings. Her phone buzzed against the glass surface of her coffee table. Without looking away from her laptop screen, Sarah reached for it, expecting another work email or maybe a delivery confirmation. Instead, she found a text from her mother. "Hi, Sarah. After much consideration, your father and I have decided to keep Christmas simple this year. Just the local family. Hope you understand. Merry Christmas." Sarah's fingers froze over her keyboard. She read the message again, then a third time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. The clinical tone, the finality of it. The casual dismissal wrapped in holiday wishes, it felt like being slapped through a screen. Her mind immediately flashed back to last Christmas morning, in the familiar chaos of her childhood home in Millbrook. She could see herself orchestrating the gift exchange like a conductor leading an orchestra, watching faces light up as expensive wrapping paper fell away to reveal her carefully chosen treasures. Emma had squealed over the American Girl doll, the limited edition one that had required 3 phone calls and a waiting list to acquire. Jessica had cried actual tears over the pearl earrings. Even Michael, usually resistant to displays of emotion, had seemed genuinely moved by the watch she'd given him. Sarah really outdid herself this year, her father had said, and the pride in his voice had warmed her more than any gift she'd received. Her mother had fussed over the weekend getaway, immediately pulling out her calendar to find the perfect dates, talking excitedly about the couple's massage package Sarah had included. That had been 10 months ago. 10 months of planning this year's Christmas, of setting aside money from each paycheck to fund what she'd already started thinking of as her masterpiece of generosity. She'd spent hours researching, comparing, ensuring each gift was perfect for its recipient. Now, staring at her mother's text, Sarah felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. Local family. As if she weren't family at all, just someone who happened to share their DNA, but lived too far away to matter. Her thumbs moved across the phone screen before her rational mind could intervene. Fine, I'll return the $3,000 worth of gifts I've already bought for everyone. Guess you won't be needing them for your simple Christmas? She hit send before she could second-guess herself. then immediately regretted the petty precision of including the dollar amount. But the damage was done, and part of her part, that had been wounded by her mother's casual dismissal, was glad she'd drawn blood. The apartment suddenly felt too quiet, too sterile. Sarah looked around at her carefully curated space, the modern furniture, the expensive art, the view of the Charles River that added an extra $1,000 to her monthly rent. Everything was exactly as she'd chosen it, controlled and perfect, and utterly empty of the messy warmth that defined her family's home. Her phone remained silent. No immediate response from her mother, no shocked apology, no frantic call to explain or retract. Just silence. Sarah called Jessica's number, her heart hammering as the phone rang. She needed an explanation, needed someone to tell her this was all a misunderstanding. That, of course, she was still invited. That family Christmas without her was unthinkable. "Hi, you've reached Jess. Leave a message and I'll call you back." The cheerful voicemail greeting felt like another slap. Sarah ended the call without leaving a message, then immediately tried again. Same result. She set the phone down and looked at the gifts spread across her living room floor. The cashmere scarf suddenly seemed ridiculous, like something a stranger might buy. The custom leather jacket looked like showing off. Even the carefully chosen books and specialty foods arranged in the corner felt heavy with implications she'd never considered before. $3,000. The number sat in her mind like an accusation. Was that really what she'd spent? She began mentally calculating. The spa weekend for her parents, $800. Jessica's pearl earrings, $450. Michael's leather jacket, $600. Emma's entire American Girl ensemble, $300. The wine collection for the family dinner, $200. The smaller gifts for her father and grandfather. Yes, $3,000. Probably more if she was being honest about the wine and the little extras she'd thrown in. More than most families spent on their entire Christmas celebration, spent on a family that apparently didn't even want her there. The apartment's heating system kicked on with a soft whisper, but Sarah felt cold anyway. She pulled her cashmere cardigan closer around her shoulders. Another expensive choice, another way she'd unconsciously armored herself in material comfort. When had gift-giving become such a production? When had Christmas become about proving something rather than celebrating something? She could trace it back through the years, watching the dollar amounts increase as her salary grew. As her insecurity about her place in the family morphed into this compulsive need to demonstrate her worth through generosity. Morning played in her memory again, but this time she noticed different details. The slight tension in her mother's smile when Sarah had announced the total cost of the family weekend she'd planned. The way Michael had glanced at his own modest gifts with what might have been embarrassment rather than gratitude. Jessica's tears, had they been joy or something more complicated? Sarah's laptop screen had gone dark while she sat in stunned contemplation. She touched the trackpad to wake it, and her campaign proposal appeared. Strategy for selling luxury goods to people who already had everything they needed. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her phone buzzed with a text notification. For a wild moment, she hoped it was her mother calling to explain, to invite her back into the fold. Instead, it was a delivery confirmation for the spa weekend package she'd booked months ago. Sarah looked around her apartment again, the wrapped gifts that now felt like evidence of her own desperation. At the space she'd filled with beautiful things that couldn't fill the hollow ache in her chest. At the life she'd built that was apparently so separate from her family's that they could simply decide to celebrate without her. Outside her windows, Boston sparkled with holiday lights. Families gathering in apartments and houses across the city. People who knew where they belonged and with whom. Sarah Mitchell, successful marketing executive, owner of expensive tastes and an impressive bank account, sat alone among her rejected gifts and wondered when she'd become someone her own family could so easily leave behind. Her phone remained silent, a small black rectangle holding the weight of all her unanswered questions. Sarah's phone remained silent on the coffee table as she stared at it through the long December night. Leap had been impossible every time she closed her eyes. Her mother's text message appeared behind her eyelids like a neon accusation. Just the local family. The words had taken on a life of their own, repeating in her mind with different emphasis each time. Just the local family, the local family, just the local family. By 3 a.m., she'd moved to her kitchen island with her laptop, scrolling through months of family text messages and emails. Sarah, it's more complicated than that. Then explain it to me. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my own mother decided to uninvite me from Christmas via text message like, I'm some acquaintance she doesn't want to see anymore. She's been talking about wanting a simpler Christmas for months. Ever since Dad's Jessica stopped abruptly. Since Dad's what? Another pause. His heart episode in June. It scared her, Sarah. It scared all of us. She started talking about how she wanted Christmas to be about being together, not about stuff. The word hung between them like an accusation. Stuff. All of Sarah's carefully chosen, expensive gifts reduced to stuff. So this is about my gifts? It's about the fact that I try to do nice things for our family? It's not about the gifts themselves? Jessica said carefully. It's about Sarah. When was the last time you called just to talk? When was the last time you visited when it wasn't a holiday or someone's birthday? When was the last time you asked about our lives instead of planning things for us? Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm busy, Jess. I have a demanding job. I live 3 hours away, I know. We all know how successful you are, how important your job is. But sometimes it feels like you've decided that buying us things is easier than actually spending time with us. The accusation hit like a physical blow. That's not fair. I spend plenty of time with you guys. 2 days at Christmas. 1 day? For Mom's birthday. Maybe Easter if you don't have work conflicts. Sarah Emma barely knows you outside of the expensive presents you bring her. I work hard so I can afford to do nice things for the people I love. I thought that mattered. It does matter, but... Jessica's voice grew gentler. Sarah, do you remember last Christmas morning? You spent the entire gift exchange taking pictures and videos, making sure everyone's reactions were perfect. You were more focused on documenting how happy your gifts made us than on actually being happy with us. Sarah's mouth opened to argue, but the words wouldn't come. She did remember taking photos. She remembered posting them on social media with captions about family and gratitude. She remembered the satisfaction of seeing the likes and comments from colleagues who envied her close family relationships. I wanted to capture the moment, she said weakly. But you weren't in the moment, Sarah. You were performing it. The words sat heavy in Sarah's chest as she heard Emma's voice in the background, asking if she was going to be late for school. I have to go, Jessica said. But Sarah? This isn't about punishing you. Mom loves you. We all do. But maybe it's time to figure out how to show us you love us too without your credit card. The line went dead, leaving Sarah alone with her coffee and her confusion. She looked around her pristine apartment, at the wrapped gifts that suddenly felt like props in a play she'd been performing without realizing it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, her colleague at the marketing firm. Coffee before the Monday morning disaster meeting. You looked stressed on Friday. Sarah stared at the message. When had Marcus started paying attention to her stress levels? When had anyone at work started seeing past her professional facade? She thought about Jessica's words about performing versus being present, and wondered if she'd been acting out some version of herself. For so long that she'd forgotten who she actually was underneath. Coffee sounds good, she typed back. I could use someone to talk to. As she sent the message, Sarah realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd admitted to needing someone. The acknowledgement felt strange and vulnerable, like stepping outside, without armor. But maybe, she thought, as she finally headed to her bedroom to try to sleep, that was exactly what she needed to do. Sarah spent Sunday morning rehearsing what she would say to Michael, pacing her apartment while crafting the perfect approach. She needed an ally, someone who understood the family dynamics and could help her make sense of their mother's decision. Michael had always been the responsible one, the good son who'd never rebelled or caused waves. Surely he would see how unfair this was. She called him just after lunch, calculating that he'd be home from church, but before the Sunday dinner chaos. With his wife and 2 young children? Sarah? Michael's voice carried surprise. Everything okay? You never call on weekends? Already she was starting wrong. I'm fine, I just Did you know about Christmas? About Mom's decision? A pause that lasted too long. Yeah, she talked to us about it. And you think it's okay? You think it's reasonable to just exclude me like this? Sarah. Michael's voice took on the patient tone he probably used with difficult parents at the high school where he served as principal. It's not about excluding you. It's about Mom wanting a different kind of Christmas this year. It's different how? Different without me? Different without the pressure? The word hit her like a slap. What pressure? Come on, Sarah. You know what I'm talking about? Every Christmas becomes the Sarah show. You swoop in with your expensive gifts and your plans for elaborate dinners, and the rest of us just watch. Sarah felt her defensive walls slam into place. I'm sorry for trying to make Christmas special for everyone. That's not what I said. Michael's voice grew sharper. Said you make it about you, about how much you can spend, how impressed you can make everyone, how grateful we should be that successful Sarah Mitchell remembered us little people. The accusation was so unexpected, so harsh, that Sarah actually gasped. That's not. I never. Last Christmas, you spent more on Emma's American Girl doll than I spent on both my kids combined. Do you know how that felt? Standing there watching my daughter's face light up over your gift, while she barely glanced at the art supplies I got her. I was just trying to make her happy. You were trying to win. Michael's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. You turned Christmas morning into a competition nobody else could afford to enter. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. I work hard for my money. I should be able to spend it on my family. I should be able to, yes. But did you ever think about how it affects the rest of us? Did you ever consider that maybe your generosity makes everyone else's gifts look pathetic? That's not my fault, isn't it? Michael's voice rose slightly, and Sarah could hear one of his children asking something in the background. Hold on, he said, his voice muffled as he spoke to his child. Then he was back. Sarah, I've been wanting to have this conversation for years. What conversation? The one where I tell you that your idea of love is exhausting. The words hit her like a physical blow. Sarah sank onto her couch, surrounded by the expensive gifts she'd planned to take to Millbrook. I don't understand. Everything is transactional with you. You swoop in twice a year with your big gestures and expensive presents, and then you disappear back to your important life in Boston. But God forgive any of us if we don't perform enough gratitude for your generosity. I don't expect yes, you do. You expect us to be impressed? You expect us to make a big deal about how successful you are, how much you can afford to spend on us, and honestly, it's gotten old. Sarah felt like she was drowning. I was trying to show you I love you by buying us things. But when was the last time you asked about my job? When was the last time you knew what was happening in Jessica's life beyond what she needed help paying for? When was the last time you had a real conversation with Dad about anything other than his retirement plans that you want to fund? I care about all of you. I know you do. But caring and showing up are different things, Sarah. You care enough to write checks, but not enough to actually be present in our lives. In the background, Sarah could hear Michael's wife calling him to dinner, hear his children's voices raised in some minor dispute. The sounds of a real family life, messy and immediate and ongoing, at the carefully orchestrated holiday visits. That had become her only window into their world. So you support Mom's decision? Sarah said quietly. I support Mom wanting a Christmas where she doesn't have to worry about living up to your expectations. Where the focus is on being together, instead of on whether everyone is sufficiently grateful for what you've bought them. I never expected. You never said you expected it. But Sarah, you take pictures of everything. You post about our grateful faces on social media. You've turned our family celebrations into content for your personal brand. The accusation stung because it was true. Sarah thought about her Instagram feed, about the carefully curated photos of family gatherings that made her colleagues envious of her close family relationships. She thought about the satisfaction she felt when people commented on how lucky her family was to have her. I didn't realize. She started, then stopped, because she had realized, hadn't she? Some part of her had always known that her gift-giving was as much about her own need to feel important as it was about making others happy. Look, Michael said, his voice gentler now. Nobody's saying you're a bad person, but maybe it's time To figure out how to be part of this family without your wallet? I don't know how to do that, Sarah admitted, the words coming out smaller than she'd intended. Then maybe this Christmas is a chance to learn. After Michael hung up, Sarah sat in her living room surrounded by wrapped gifts that now felt like evidence of her own delusion. She thought about the competition Michael had accused her of creating, about the way she'd turned family love into a performance metric. For the first time since receiving her mother's text, Sarah wondered if maybe the problem wasn't her family's ingratitude. Maybe the problem was her. By Monday morning, Sarah could barely concentrate on work. The conversation with Michael had left her feeling like she was seeing her family relationships through a funhouse, mirror everything distorted and unfamiliar. She caught herself staring at her computer screen during meetings, her mind replaying every family interaction she could remember, searching for evidence of the patterns her siblings had described. During her lunch break, she found herself Googling family therapists Boston with a desperation that surprised her. She'd never been to therapy before, had always prided herself on being able to handle her own problems. But this felt bigger than anything she could untangle alone. Eleanor Chen's profile caught her attention immediately. The photo showed a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a warm smile. And her specialization in family dynamics and holiday conflicts felt like a sign from the universe. Better yet, she had an opening that afternoon due to a cancellation. Dr. Chen's office was nothing like Sarah had expected. Instead of a clinical white space, she found herself in a warm room with soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and the kind of atmosphere that made honesty feel possible. "What brings you here today, Sarah?" Dr. Chen asked, settling into her chair with a notepad and an expression of genuine interest. Sarah had planned to present her case methodically, to explain how unreasonable her family was being, how unfair their accusations were. Instead, she found herself blurting out, "I think my family doesn't actually like me." Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "It's a painful thing to believe. What makes you feel that way? They uninvited me from Christmas? Via text message? It's after I'd already bought everyone gifts and planned?" Sarah's voice trailed off as she realized how her complaint sounded. "I mean, it's not about the gifts. It's about the fact that they can apparently celebrate Christmas without me like I don't matter." "Tell me about these gifts," Dr. Chen said gently. "I always buy nice things for my family. I work hard, I make good money, and I want to share that with the people I love. Is that so wrong?" "There's nothing wrong with generosity, but I'm curious about what it means to you." Sarah shifted in her chair. "What do you mean?" "What? You mentioned that you always buy nice things for your family. How do you feel when you're selecting these gifts?" Sarah paused, trying to articulate something she'd never really examined. "I feel good. I feel like I'm taking care of them, like I'm showing them how much they mean to me." "And how do you feel when they receive the gifts? Happy, proud, like I've done something meaningful?" Sarah hesitated. "Like I've proven something." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "What are you proving?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah felt exposed, like Dr. Chen had somehow seen through her carefully constructed explanations to something more vulnerable underneath. That I'm successful, that I'm worth having around, that I belong with them even though I'm different now. Different how? I left. I went to college in Boston, and I never moved back. I built this life that's nothing like theirs, and sometimes I think they see me as someone who thinks she's better than them. You think you're better than them? No. The response came too quickly, too defensively. I worked hard to get where I am. I wanted more than what was available in Millbrook. Is that wrong? Not at all. But I wonder if your gift giving might be a way of trying to bridge that gap. A way of saying, I may have left, but I still love you. Sarah felt tears threatening, maybe. And what happens when that bridge building becomes the primary way you connect with your family? I don't know what you mean, your family. Is telling you they want more of your presence and less of your presence. How does that make you feel? Confused? Hurt? Like nothing I do is ever enough? Sarah wiped her eyes. I thought I was being a good daughter, a good sister. I thought I was showing them I cared. I believe you were trying to show them you cared. But sometimes our best intentions can have unintended consequences. Can you think of any times when your generosity might have made others feel uncomfortable? Sarah thought about Michael's words, about the competition he'd accused her of creating. My brother said I made Christmas into a contest nobody else could afford to enter. How did that feel to hear? Awful. I never meant to do that. Wanted to make people happy? I believe that. But I wonder if there's another need being met by your gift giving. You mentioned proving your worth, proving you belong. What happens if you can't prove those things through generosity? The question terrified her. I don't know. I've never tried. What are you afraid might happen? That they'll realize they don't actually need me? That I'm just someone who shows up twice a year and tries to buy their love, and without that, Sarah's voice broke. Without that, maybe there's no reason for them to want me around. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. Sarah, what if I told you that your family, excluding you from Christmas, might actually be an invitation? An invitation to what? To discover whether their love for you is conditional on what you can provide, or whether it exists independent of your generosity. And equally important, to discover whether your love for them is about who they are, or about how they make you feel when you're playing the role of benefactor. Sarah felt like the room was spinning. I don't know how to be with them without the gifts. I don't know what else I have to offer. That Dr. Chen said gently. Sounds like something worth exploring. As Sarah left the office with a follow-up, appointments scheduled and homework to examine her childhood patterns around money and love, she felt simultaneously more confused and more hopeful than she had in days. Maybe the problem wasn't that her family didn't understand her generosity. Maybe the problem was that she'd forgotten who she was without it. Sarah's assignment from Dr. Chen felt monumental. Examine her childhood relationship with money and love. She'd been avoiding her storage unit for months. But Tuesday evening found her standing in the fluorescent-lit hallway of the facility, key in hand, preparing to excavate her past. The unit was packed with the debris of a life in transition college. Textbooks, furniture that hadn't fit in her current apartment, and several banker's boxes labeled family photos, memorabilia in her mother's careful handwriting. Sarah pulled out the first box and sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, surrounded by the ghosts of Christmases past. The photos told a story she'd forgotten. There she was at age 7, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a handmade card she'd crafted for her parents. At 9, presenting a carefully wrapped package that contained a bookmark made from construction paper and yarn. At 11, beaming with pride over a batch of cookies she'd baked by herself, the first time she'd been allowed to use the oven without supervision. But it was a photo from her 13th Christmas that stopped her cold. She remembered this moment with painful clarity now. In the picture, she stood slightly apart from the family group, holding a small wrapped box. Her parents were focused on Michael, who was displaying a wooden jewelry box he'd made in shop class. Jessica was admiring the craftsmanship, running her fingers over the smooth finish. Even a Jessica's baby, then just a toddler, was reaching for the beautiful wooden box with curious hands. Sarah remembered how long she'd saved for that Christmas gift, how she'd babysat for neighbors and done extra chores to earn the money for the silver locket she'd bought her mother. Real silver, not costume jewelry. She'd been so proud of the purchase, so certain it would be the most special gift under the tree. But Michael's handmade jewelry box had stolen the show. It was beautiful, personal, created with his own hands. During hours of careful work in the school workshop, the locket, despite its higher price tag, had seemed somehow lesser in comparison, store-bought, impersonal. Just another pretty thing that could have been purchased by anyone with enough money. Sarah found her old report cards in the same box, and the pattern became even clearer. Straight A's from elementary school through high school, each one carefully preserved by her mother. But as she flipped through them, she noticed something that made her chest tighten. The early ones were covered in her parents' handwriting, so proud. An excellent work. We love you.
Hi.
But as the years went on, the comments became fewer, more perfunctory. Good job and keep it up, and eventually just her parents' signatures. Acknowledging receipt but not celebrating achievement? Had her academic success, like her expensive gifts, become expected rather than special? Had she set a bar so high that clearing it no longer felt noteworthy to anyone, including herself? She found a stack of her old diary entries, written in the careful script of a teenager trying to make sense of her place in the world. One entry dated December 27th, when she would have been 16, made her stomach clench. Christmas was weird this year. I got everyone really good gifts, spent almost everything I made at the bookstore this fall. Mom loved the cashmere scarf, I think, and Dad seemed happy with the expensive golf balls. But when Michael gave them that photo album he made with all the family pictures, they both cried, actually cried. I spent 10 times more money than he did, but his gift made them cry. I don't understand why homemade things always seem to matter more than store-bought things. I work really hard for my money. Shouldn't that count for something? The words, written in her own hand more than a decade ago, revealed a pattern that had been forming even then. She'd been trying to compete with authentic connection through financial expenditure, trying to buy her way into the kind of emotional intimacy that her siblings seemed to create effortlessly. Another entry from the following summer was even more revealing. Got into Boston University today. Full scholarship for academic achievement. Mom and Dad are proud, but they keep talking about how far away Boston is, how I'll be gone during holidays, how the family will be different without me. Part of me is excited to get away from always feeling like I'm trying to catch up to Michael. And Jessica, in the Be in Love department, maybe in college I can figure out who I'm supposed to be when I'm not somebody's little sister. Sarah sat back against the cold metal wall of the storage unit. Even at 18, she'd recognized that. She felt like she was trying to catch up in the being loved department. College had been an escape from that feeling, a chance to reinvent herself as someone whose worth wasn't constantly measured against her siblings' accomplishments. But apparently she'd never actually solved the problem. She'd just gotten better at throwing money at it. The last item in the box was a small envelope addressed to her in her grandmother's careful handwriting. Inside was a card from her sweet 16th birthday. Tucked inside the card was a $20 bill of fortune to her grandmother, who lived on a modest pension. The note inside was brief, but devastating in its simplicity. Dear Sarah, I know. You're always trying so hard to take care of everyone else. Sometimes I worry you've forgotten that you're just as deserving of love as anyone else, with or without the things you do for people. You're enough just as you are. Love, Grandma. Her grandmother had seen it too, the trying too hard, the desperate need to earn love through service. Even as a teenager, Sarah had been performing worthiness instead of simply being worthy. Wiped tears from her cheeks and packed the photos away, but kept her grandmother's note. As she drove home through the December night, she thought about the little girl in those photos, the one who'd been so proud of her homemade cards and construction paper bookmarks, who'd beamed with genuine joy at the simple act of giving something she'd created with her own hands. When had she decided that wasn't enough? When had she started believing that love could be purchased, that her value to her family was measured in dollars spent rather than presents offered? For the first time since receiving her mother's text, Sarah began to wonder if maybe her family's decision wasn't about rejecting her. Maybe it was about inviting her to remember who she'd been before she'd started trying to buy her way home. Wednesday afternoon found Sarah driving through the familiar streets of Millbrook for the first time since Easter, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she navigated toward Sunset Manor. She'd called ahead to make sure her grandfather would be available, claiming it was just a friendly visit, but they both knew better. Frank Mitchell had been the family's unofficial counselor for 8 decades. And Sarah had a feeling he'd been expecting this conversation. The assisted living facility was nicer than she'd expected, more like a small hotel than the sterile institution she'd imagined. She found Frank in the sunroom, working on a crossword puzzle and looking every bit as sharp as he had at 8:04. His eyes lit up when he saw her, but there was something knowing in his expression that made Sarah feel transparent. Sarah, sweetheart, this is a nice surprise. He folded his puzzle and gestured to the chair beside him. Hello. I suspect it's not entirely social. Sarah settled into the chair, suddenly feeling like a child again. Hi, Grandpa. How are you? Feeling old but not dead yet? The real question is how you're feeling. You look like someone who's been wrestling with something bigger than herself. There was no point in pretending with Frank. He'd always been able to see through her carefully constructed facades. Mom uninvited me from Christmas. Frank nodded. Slowly. I heard about that. I didn't hear is why you think it happened. I don't know. Jessica says it's because I'm too focused on gifts instead of being present. Michael says I turn everything into a competition. I honestly don't understand what I've done wrong. Tell me about the gifts you bought this year. Sarah found herself recounting her Christmas shopping list, watching her grandfather's face for some sign of judgment or approval. Instead, he listened with the patient attention he'd always given her childhood problems. $3,000, he said when she finished. That's more than I made in 6 months when I was starting out. But you lived in a different time. Grandpa, $3,000 now isn't the same as I know what inflation is, sweetheart. I'm old, not stupid. His voice was gentle, but firm. What I'm wondering is what you think that money is supposed to accomplish. I want to make everyone happy. I want to show them I love them. You think the only way to do that is through expensive presents? No, but I don't know. Maybe Sarah felt tears threatening again. I feel like I don't know how to show love any other way anymore. Frank was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the small garden visible from the sunroom. You know, when your father was growing up, we didn't have much money. Christmas presents were practical things, socks. Maybe a new book if we were lucky. But I'll never forget the Christmas when your dad was about 12 and he gave me something he'd made himself. What was it? A wooden box for my tools? Took him months to make it in the basement, working on it after school when he thought I wasn't looking. It wasn't perfect. The corners weren't quite square. The finish was a little rough. But he'd put love into every piece of wood, every careful measurement. Frank's eyes grew distant. I still have that box. Use it every day. That's beautiful. But you don't think you can compete with handmade gifts because you're not crafty? Frank's eyes twinkled. The most valuable thing you can give someone isn't something you can buy or even make. It's your attention. Your presence, your genuine interest in their life. I am interested in their lives. When's the last time you had a real conversation with your father about something other than his retirement plans? When's the last time you asked your sister about her nursing job, about how she's handling being a single mother, about what she dreams about for her future? Sarah opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. She couldn't remember. When's the last time you visited me just to visit, not because it was a holiday or my birthday? The question hit like a physical blow. I've been busy with work, and I know, sweetheart, you've built a successful life, and I'm proud of you for that. But success isn't worth much if it costs you the people you love. I haven't lost anyone, haven't you? When's the last time someone in this family called you just to talk? When's the last time you felt like you knew what was really happening in their day-to-day lives? Sarah realized she couldn't answer that question either. Her family interactions had become transactional updates exchanged during gift-giving occasions. Surface-level pleasantries that never went deeper than weather and work. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. Well, the first step is understanding what needs fixing. Your mother's heart scare with your father. What heart scare? Frank looked at her with something that might have been pity. He had a mild heart attack in June, Sarah. Spent 2 days in the hospital. Scared all of us pretty badly. Sarah felt the world tilt. Nobody told me. Your mother wanted to, but your father asked her not to. He said you were dealing with some big work project, and he didn't want to worry you. But I should have known. Should have been there. Yes, you should have. But you weren't, and that's part of the problem. You've made yourself so separate. From our daily lives that we've learned to handle crises without you, the words were devastating in their simple honesty. Sarah had been so focused on being the successful daughter who swooped in with grand gestures that she'd missed the moment. When her family had needed her most, your father's heart episode made all of us think about what really matters, Frank continued. Your mother started talking about wanting Christmas to be about being together, not about impressing each other or performing gratitude. She wants to know that if something happens to one of us, you'll be there because you love us, not because you feel obligated to provide for us. I do love you. I know you do. But love isn't just a feeling, Sarah. It's a choice you make every day. And lately, it seems like you've been choosing your career and your independent life over staying connected to us. Sarah felt like she was drowning in the truth of his words. I don't know how to be the kind of daughter they want me to be. They don't want you to be any particular kind of daughter. They just want you to be present. To show up not as the successful marketing executive or the generous gift giver, but as Sarah. Just Sarah. What if just Sarah isn't enough? Frank reached over and took her hand in his weathered one. Sweetheart, just Sarah is all we've ever wanted. The rest is just noise. As Sarah drove back to Boston that evening, her grandfather's words echoed. In her mind, she thought about her father's heart attack, about the family crisis she'd been deemed too busy to share. She thought about the wooden toolbox her father had made with love instead of money, about the way her family had learned to function without her. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Sarah started to understand that maybe her exclusion from Christmas wasn't a punishment. Maybe it was a chance to find her way back to the family she'd somehow lost while trying so hard to prove she belonged to them. Thursday evening, Sarah found herself driving toward Millbrook again, this time without calling ahead. She'd spent the day at work distracted and restless, her grandfather's revelation about her father's heart attack playing on repeat in her mind. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how many important family moments she'd missed. While focusing on maintaining her image as the successful daughter who had everything under control, the Mitchell family home looked exactly as it had throughout her childhood, a modest two-story colonial with white shutters and a wraparound porch that her father had built himself. The Christmas decorations were simpler this year, she noticed. Just lights along the roofline and a wreath on the front door, nothing like the elaborate displays she remembered from her youth. David Mitchell answered the door in his favorite flannel shirt and work jeans. Looking older than Sarah remembered, but healthier than she'd feared. His face showed surprise, then genuine warmth. Sarah, what are you doing here? I came to see you, to talk to you. She hesitated. Is Mom home? She's at her therapy appointment. Won't be back for an hour. David stepped aside to let her in. Come on in, sweetheart. I'll make us some coffee. The house felt different somehow. Maybe, or just more worn than she remembered. Sarah followed her father into the kitchen, where he moved with the careful deliberation of someone who'd been reminded of his mortality. Dad, Sarah began, then stopped. How do you ask someone why they didn't tell you they nearly died? You talked to your grandfather, David said, not looking at her, as he prepared the coffee maker. About your heart attack? David's shoulders sagged slightly. I figured he might. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew what would happen. You'd drop everything and rush up here and turn it into a crisis that needed managing. You'd want to hire the best cardiologist, research the best hospitals, probably try to move us to Boston so you could keep an eye on us. The accuracy of his prediction stung. Would that be so terrible? Would be you trying to fix something with money and planning instead of just being here with me while I was scared? David turned to face her, and Sarah saw something. In his eyes she'd never noticed before, a deep wariness that had nothing to do with physical health. I was terrified, Sarah, lying in that hospital bed, thinking about all the things I'd never said to my children. All the time I'd wasted worrying about whether we were good enough parents, whether we'd given you kids what you needed. His voice grew quiet, and I realized that I didn't know how to reach you anymore. You can always reach me, Dad. I'm your daughter. Are you? Because sometimes it feels like you're a stranger who sends expensive gifts and shows up twice a year, too. Check on us. The words echoed what Michael and Jessica had said. But coming from her father, her gentle, diplomatic father, who never said anything that might hurt someone's feelings, they carried a weight that made Sarah's chest tight. I've been building my career, trying to make something of myself, and we're proud of you for that. We've always been proud of you. But somewhere along the way, Rick Parker discovered Allison's purchase through his real estate connections and arrived at the restaurant in a fury. Their confrontation took place in the dining room after hours, with Frank and Katie witnessing. The family drama unfold. Rick accused Allison of making a reckless financial decision just to spite him, while Allison defended her choice as a meaningful investment in community and legacy. The argument revealed the deep hurt and misunderstanding on both sides, but also opened the door for honest communication about their different values and definitions of success. The heavy oak door of Grandma's table rattled on its hinges as Rick Parker pushed through it at 9:15 p.m., his face flushed with the kind of anger that had built momentum during the 20-minute drive from his office. Allison looked up from the reservation book she'd been studying with Katie, her stomach dropping as she recognized the storm in her father's eyes. "So this is where my daughter has been spending her evenings," Rick announced, his voice cutting through the warm silence of the closed restaurant. "Buying restaurants like they're toys, making decisions that could bankrupt her just to prove some ridiculous point." Frank Morrison emerged from the kitchen, dish towel in hand, his weathered face taking in the family drama with the practiced calm of someone who'd seen decades of human conflict play out in his dining room. Katie instinctively moved closer to Allison, a gesture of solidarity that didn't go unnoticed by any of the adults in the room. "Dad, please keep your voice down," Allison said, standing slowly from her chair. "We can discuss this like adults." "Adults?" Rick's laugh was harsh, echoing off the brick walls. "Adults don't make impulsive purchases of struggling businesses just to spite their parents. Adults think before they act. Adults consider consequences." "I did think about this." Allison shot back, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "I researched the financials. I understand the market. I know what I'm getting into." "You know what you're getting into?" Rick gestured around the restaurant with barely contained fury. "You know about the 15-hour days? The razor-thin profit margins. The constant worry about health inspectors and food costs and equipment failures. You know about competing with chain restaurants that can undercut your prices and still turn a profit?" Frank cleared his throat gently. "Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, Mr. Parker." "If I may know, you may not," Rick snapped, though his tone softened slightly when he looked at the older man. "I'm sure you're a fine businessman, Frank, but my daughter has no idea what she's gotten herself into. She thinks owning a restaurant is some romantic notion, like running a bed and breakfast in Vermont." "Actually," Allison said, her voice growing stronger, "I think owning a restaurant is about creating something meaningful. Something that brings people together, that serves the community, that has value beyond profit margins and quarterly reports." Rick stared at his daughter as if she'd started speaking a foreign language. "Value beyond profit margins. Allison, this is a business, not a charity. If it doesn't make money, it doesn't matter how meaningful it is. It won't survive." "Maybe survival isn't just about money," Allison countered. "Maybe it's about being needed, about filling a space in people's lives that matters." "You sound like a college sophomore who's taken one philosophy class," Rick said dismissively. "The real world doesn't run on good intentions and warm feelings. It runs on cash flow and sound financial planning and realistic expectations about risk and return." Katie stepped forward, her young face fierce with protective anger. "This place has been here for 40 years. It's fed 3 generations of families, employed dozens of people, hosted first dates and anniversary dinners and birthday parties. If that's not value, I don't know what is." Rick turned his attention to Katie with the kind of withering look he'd perfected in boardrooms. "And where has that 40 years of value gotten you? You're about to lose everything because sentiment doesn't pay the rent." "Rick," Frank's voice carried the quiet authority of age and experience, "your daughter didn't buy this place out of sentiment. She bought it because she saw something worth preserving, something that could thrive with the right combination of respect for tradition and smart business practices." "She bought it to make a point," Rick insisted, "to prove to me that she can own something meaningful, whatever that's supposed to mean." "Well, congratulations, Allison. You've successfully purchased yourself a hobby that will drain your savings and teach you exactly why I worry about your judgment." The words hit Allison like physical blows, each one designed to wound. She felt the familiar sting of his disappointment, the crushing weight of never being able to meet his standards or gain his approval. But this time, instead of retreating into hurt silence, she found her voice. "You want to know why I bought this place?" Allison's voice rose, carrying months of frustration and hurt. "You want to know what point I'm trying to make? You told me I'd never own anything that matters. You dismissed everything I've built, everything I've worked for, as if it was all just playing dress-up with real life. I was trying to prepare you for reality. You were trying to make me feel small." The words burst out of her with surprising force. "You were trying to make me doubt myself because my version of success doesn't look like yours, because I didn't follow your path, didn't build the kind of empire you respect." Rick's face flushed deeper. "I built my empire to provide for my family, to create security, to ensure that my children would have opportunities I never had. Everything I did was for you and your mother. I'm grateful for that, Dad. I really am. But But gratitude doesn't mean I have to live my life according to your definition of what matters. Carol Parker's voice came from the doorway, soft but firm. It doesn't mean you have to tear each other apart either. Everyone turned to see Allison's mother standing in the entrance, her coat still buttoned against the November cold. She looked between her husband and daughter with the weary expression of someone who'd mediated this same fight in different forms for years. "Mom," Allison started. "I followed your father here," Carol said, moving into the restaurant with careful steps. "I was afraid this conversation might go exactly like it's going." She looked around the dining room, taking in the warm lighting and family photographs with appreciation. "This is a lovely place, Frank. You should be proud of what you've built." "Here," Frank nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Mrs. Parker. It's been my life's work." "And now it's Allison's," Carol said simply. "Rick, do you remember when you bought your first property? That little duplex on Maple Street that everyone said was a terrible investment?" Rick's jaw tightened. That was different. "I understood construction. I could see the potential. You were 26 years old and terrified." Carol interrupted gently. "You called your father 3 times a week asking for advice. You barely slept for the first month, and you were convinced you'd made the biggest mistake of your life. But I had a plan. You had a dream," Carol corrected. "Just like Allison has a dream. The only difference is that her dream doesn't look like yours." Allison felt tears threatening as she watched her parents face each other across the restaurant. This was the conversation they'd been avoiding for years. The fundamental disagreement about risk and security and what constituted a life well lived. "She's going to fail," Rick said quietly, his anger giving way to something more vulnerable. "The restaurant business is brutal, Carol. The failure rate is astronomical. She's going to lose everything, and I won't be able to protect her from that." "Maybe protecting her isn't your job anymore," Carol replied. "Maybe supporting her is." Frank cleared his throat gently. "If I may share something from my own experience," he said. "When Betty and I opened this place in 1983, everyone told us we were crazy. The neighborhood was rough, the economy was uncertain, and we had no experience in the restaurant business. But we had something more valuable than experience." "What?" "That," Rick asked, despite himself. "We had a vision of what we wanted to create, a place where people could come together, where families could celebrate, where the community could gather. We had love for what we were doing, and we had each other." Frank looked at Allison with gentle pride. "Your daughter has that same vision. She sees what this place could be, what it could mean to the neighborhood. She's not just buying a business, she's investing in a community. But what if she fails?" Rick's voice cracked slightly. "What if I'm right and she loses everything?" "Then she'll learn from it," Frank said simply. "The way you learned from your failures, the way we all learn." "But she failed having tried something meaningful, something that aligned with her values." Katie stepped forward again, her voice steady despite her youth. "Mr. Parker, I've been working here for 2 years. I've seen how hard this business is, how many challenges we face every day. But I've also seen what happens when someone cares about more than just profit margins. Your daughter has spent weeks learning every aspect of this operation. She listens to our ideas, she respects our experience, and she's making decisions based on what's best for the restaurant and the community, not just what's best for her bank account." Rick looked at Katie for a long moment, then at Frank, then finally at his daughter. "Allison, I need you to understand something. When I said you'd never own anything that matters, I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to protect you from making the same mistakes I've seen other people make." "What mistakes?" Allison asked quietly, his confusing passion with business sense. "Thinking that good intentions are enough to overcome market realities? Believing that if you care enough about something, it will automatically succeed. But caring does matter, doesn't it?" Allison's voice was small, uncertain. "Shouldn't the work we do mean something beyond just making money?" Rick was quiet for a long moment, looking around the restaurant that Frank had built with for decades of care and dedication. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than it had been all evening. "Maybe meaning and financial success don't have to be mutually exclusive," he admitted. "Maybe I've been so focused on protecting you from failure that I've forgotten to ask what success looks like to you." Allison felt something shift between them, a crack in the wall of misunderstanding that had stood between them for years. Success to me looks like this place, Dad. It looks like Frank being able to retire, knowing his legacy is secure. It looks like Katie having a future in something she's passionate about. It looks like families having a place to gather and celebrate for another 40 years. And if it fails financially, then I'll deal with that when it happens. Won't let fear of failure prevent me from trying to build something meaningful. Carol moved to stand between her husband and daughter, placing a hand on each of their arms. Your father loves you, Allison. His fear of seeing you hurt sometimes makes him say things that sound like he doesn't believe in you, but that's not what's in his heart. Rick looked at his daughter with something that might have been recognition. I do believe in you. I just wish you'd chosen something safer. Safe isn't always better, Dad. Sometimes the most meaningful things are the ones that require us to take risks. Frank stepped forward, his eyes bright with emotion. If I may say so, watching you two talk about this gives me hope for what this place will become. Allison, you have your father's business sense, even if you apply it differently than he does. And Rick, your daughter has your determination and your refusal to accept anything less than excellence. Rick was quiet for a long moment, then looked directly at Allison. What do you need from me? The question was so unexpected that Allison almost didn't know how to answer. I need you to trust me. I need you to believe that I can make this work, even if it's not the way you would do it. And I need you to understand that if you need help, not just money, you can ask for it. Your old man might know a thing or two about running a business, even if it's not a restaurant. Katie grinned, despite the tension in the room. Are you offering to bus tables, Mr. Parker? Rick looked startled, then actually smiled. I think I'll stick to the books. Numbers I understand. Food service is apparently your area of expertise. The moment felt fragile but genuine, a tentative bridge across the chasm of misunderstanding that had divided them. Frank clapped his hands together gently. Well then, I think this calls for coffee and a piece of Betty's apple pie. It's been a long evening for everyone. As Frank moved toward the kitchen and Katie began setting out coffee cups, Allison and her father stood facing each other in the warm light of the restaurant. The fight wasn't over. There would be more conversations, more challenges, more moments when their different approaches to life would clash. But for the first time in years, Allison felt like her father was seeing her as an adult with her own valid perspective, rather than a child who needed to be corrected. I'm still worried about you, Rick said quietly. I know, Allison replied. But I hope you're also proud of me. Rick's smile was small but genuine. I've always been proud of you, sweetheart. I just sometimes have trouble showing it the right way. As they sat down to share coffee and pie in the restaurant that now belonged to her, Allison thought about ownership and what it really meant. It wasn't just about possessing something, she realized. It was about accepting responsibility for something larger than yourself, about becoming part of a legacy that would outlast your own involvement. Looking at her father's face in the warm light of Grandma's table, she thought maybe she was finally beginning to understand what owning something that mattered really looked like. 3 months into ownership, Allison faced the reality of running a restaurant while maintaining her tech business. A series of crises tested her resolve: a kitchen equipment breakdown, staffing challenges, and a negative online review that threatened to damage the restaurant's reputation. Meanwhile, her tech company suffered from her divided attention, leading to tension with Jake and potential loss of a major client. This part explored the practical challenges of Allison's ambitious dual commitments and forced her to make difficult choices about priorities and delegation. The sound that woke Allison at 3:47 a.m. was one she'd learned to dread: her phone buzzing with the restaurant's emergency number. 3 months into owning Grandma's table, she'd discovered that restaurants, like newborn babies, seemed to have their crises at the most inconvenient hours. The walk-in cooler died. Katie's voice was tight with stress. Everything's warming up and we've got the dinner prep for today, plus tomorrow's delivery that came in late yesterday. I'm here trying to save what I can, but Allison was already reaching for her clothes. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Start moving the most perishable items to the smaller reach-in coolers in the prep area. And Katie, thank you for calling. As she drove through the empty streets toward Millbrook, Allison's mind raced through calculations. A walk-in cooler repair would cost at least $2,000, maybe more if they needed a complete replacement. They'd lose money on spoiled inventory. They might have to close for a day, maybe two, losing weekend revenue they couldn't afford to miss. She found Katie in the kitchen at 4:30 a.m., surrounded by plastic bins and coolers, systematically sorting through hundreds of dollars worth of meat, vegetables, and dairy products. The young woman's efficiency was impressive, but the stress showed in the tight lines around her eyes. "How bad is it?" Allison asked, pulling on an apron. "I saved about 60% of the proteins and most of the vegetables. Dairy is questionable. Some of it was already approaching its expiration date." Katie looked up from the bin of salvaged chicken breasts. "I called 3 repair companies. The earliest anyone can get here is Monday. It's Friday night." Can't Allison's phone buzzed with her tech company ringtone. Jake's name appeared on the screen. She felt her stomach clench as she remembered the client presentation they'd scheduled for 9 a.m. "I have to take this. Where are you?" Jake's voice carried the edge of barely controlled frustration. "I'm at the office trying to finish the Morrison tech proposal, and half the graphics files are corrupted. We need to rebuild the entire presentation deck in the next 4 hours." Allison looked around the restaurant kitchen, at Katie's sorting, through salvaged food, at the dead walk-in cooler that represented a crisis she couldn't ignore. "I'm dealing with an emergency at the restaurant. Can you handle the presentation without me? Handle it without you?" "Allison, this is a potential $200,000 contract. Morrison specifically asked for you to present the strategy. I can't just show up and explain that you're playing restaurant owner instead of running our actual business." The words stung, but Allison couldn't argue with the underlying truth. She'd been dividing her attention between 2 demanding businesses for 3 months, and both were suffering. "Give me 2 hours to deal with this crisis, then I'll come in and help with the presentation." 2 hours? "Allison, we need you here now. Katie's perfectly capable of handling a broken refrigerator without you holding her hand." Allison looked at Katie, who was pretending not to hear the conversation while she worked. The young woman had been carrying more responsibility each week, handling daily operations with competence that impressed even Frank. But this wasn't just about capability. It was about who took responsibility when things went wrong. "I'll be there as soon as I can," Allison told Jake, then hung up before he could argue further. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of crisis management. Allison and Katie worked together to reorganize the kitchen around the smaller cooling units, called suppliers to emergency deliver replacement inventory, and contacted a commercial equipment rental company to provide temporary cooling until repairs could be completed. By 10 a.m., they had a workable solution that would keep the restaurant operational through the weekend. Allison arrived at her tech company office to find Jake pacing in the conference room, laptop open to a hastily rebuilt presentation that looked competent but uninspired. "They moved the meeting to 11, he said without looking up. "I've done what I can, but it's not your best work." "I know, I'm sorry. Let me see what we have." The next hour was a frantic scramble to polish the presentation, but Allison's mind kept drifting to the restaurant. Had the rental cooler arrived on time? Was Katie handling the lunch prep okay with the disrupted kitchen setup? The distraction showed in her workshake, caught herself making basic errors she'd never made before. The Morrison tech presentation went poorly. Allison found herself stumbling over points she'd normally deliver with confidence, her exhaustion and stress evident to everyone in the room. When James Morrison asked detailed questions about the implementation timeline, she gave vague answers. That clearly didn't satisfy him. "We'll be in touch," Morrison said at the end of the meeting, which in client speak meant they weren't interested. Jake waited until they were alone in the conference room before exploding. "That was a disaster. We just lost a 6-figure contract because you couldn't focus for 90 minutes. One broken cooler doesn't mean it's not about one broken cooler." Jake's voice rose to a level she'd never heard from him. "It's about the fact that you're not here anymore, Allison. Physically, mentally, emotionally. You're always thinking about that restaurant. You miss client calls because you're doing inventory. You skip strategy meetings because the prep cook called in sick. You've checked out of this business to play entrepreneur somewhere else." The accusation hit hard because it was true. Allison realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd given her tech company her full attention for an entire day. I'm doing my best to balance both. Your best isn't working. Jake slumped into his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Allison, we built this company together. It's been our shared dream for 5 years. But now it feels like you've decided that dream isn't important anymore. That's not true. This company's important to me. Important enough to be here when it matters. It's important enough to prioritize a major client presentation over restaurant equipment. Allison felt trapped between two competing loyalties, two different visions of success. What do you want me to do, Jake? Sell the restaurant? Abandon Frank and Katie and everyone who's counting on me? I want you to make a choice. You can't half-sass to businesses and expect both to succeed. Either you're an entrepreneur building a tech company, or you're a restaurateur saving some nostalgic neighborhood place. But you can't be both. The ultimatum hung between them like smoke. Allison knew Jake was right about the impossibility of her current situation. But the thought of choosing felt like cutting off a limb. Her phone buzzed with a text from Katie. Lunch rush handled. Rental cooler, working perfectly. Repair company will be here Monday morning. Everything's under control. Reading the message, Allison felt a surge of pride in Katie's competence followed. Immediately by the realization that maybe Jake had a point about her micromanaging the restaurant, Katie had handled the crisis professionally while Allison was ruining a client presentation. What if I hired a general manager for the restaurant? Allison suggested. Someone to handle day-to-day operations so I could focus more on this business. Jake looked at her skeptically. You mean someone like Katie? Katie's young, inexperienced. Katie's been running that place for 2 years. She knows more about restaurant operations than you do, but you don't trust her to make decisions without your approval. Another uncomfortable truth, Allison realized she'd been so focused on proving she could handle both businesses that she'd been inserting herself into every restaurant decision, even ones Katie was perfectly qualified to make. If I promoted Katie to general manager and stepped back from daily operations, would that be enough? It would be a start. But Allison, I need to know that this company is your priority. I need to know that when we have a crisis or an opportunity, you're going to be here, fully present, not thinking about prep schedules and health inspectors. That afternoon, Allison drove back to the restaurant, feeling like she was navigating between two different versions of herself. The successful tech entrepreneur who'd built a profitable company and the restaurant owner who'd found meaning in preserving something valuable. Both identities felt real, but Jake was right that they were pulling her in opposite directions. She found Katie efficiently managing the dinner prep despite the equipment crisis, directing the kitchen staff with quiet confidence. Watching her work, Allison realized that her constant presence wasn't necessary. It was actually counterproductive. Katie, can we talk? They sat in the empty dining room while the kitchen hummed with productive activity behind them. Looked at the young woman who'd become both her student and her teacher over the past 3 months. I want to offer you the general manager position, Allison began. Full authority over daily operations, hiring decisions, menu planning, everything except major financial decisions and long-term strategic planning. Katie's eyes widened. Are you serious? I'm serious. You've been doing the work already, you? Should have the title and the authority that goes with it, plus profit sharing that reflects your increased responsibility. But what about you? I thought you wanted to be hands-on with the restaurant. Allison smiled ruefully. I did too. But I'm learning that good ownership sometimes means stepping back and letting competent people do their jobs. You don't need me here every day, Katie. You need me to support you and trust you and be available when you actually need help. Katie was quiet for a moment, then asked, What changed your mind? I nearly lost a major client today because I was worried about refrigerator repairs that you handled perfectly without me. I've been so focused on proving I could do everything that I haven't been doing anything well. So you're going to focus on your tech company. I'm going to find a balance that works for both businesses. That means trusting you to run this place the way you've been wanting to run it, and trusting myself to delegate instead of micromanage. Katie grinned. Does this mean I can finally implement that weekend brunch menu I've been proposing? It means you can implement whatever makes business sense. That's what general managers do. As Allison drove back to Boston that evening, she felt simultaneously lighter and more anxious. Stepping back from daily restaurant operations felt like a loss of control, but also like a chance to breathe. For the first time in months, she might be able to focus on her tech company without constantly worrying about dinner service. Phone rang as she hit the highway. Katie's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, Allison's old panic returned. Another crisis, another emergency she'd have to handle. "Everything okay?"
She answered, "Everything's fine." Katie laughed.
"I just wanted to say thank you for trusting me with this, for believing I can handle it. I won't let you down. I know you won't. And Katie, if you need me, really need me, I'll be here. But I'm betting you're going to discover you need me a lot less than either of us thought." After she hung up, Allison realized this was what ownership really meant, not controlling every detail, but creating the conditions for others to succeed. Frank had trusted her with his legacy. Now it was time for her to trust Katie with the daily reality of preserving it. The balance wouldn't be perfect, and there would be more crises that tested her priorities. But for the first time since buying the restaurant, Allison felt like she might actually be able to honor both her commitments by learning when to step forward and when to step back. As the lights of Boston appeared on the horizon, she was already thinking about how to rebuild the relationship with Morrison Tech, how to refocus on the business she'd built with Jake. Tomorrow, she would call James Morrison personally and ask for another chance to present their proposal. Tonight, she would trust Katie to handle dinner service without her. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. After nearly losing both her businesses, Allison implemented a new approach that emphasized partnership and delegation. She promoted Katie to general manager with equity participation, restructured her tech company to require less day-to-day involvement, and began to find a sustainable balance between her two ventures. A successful community event at the Restaurant Neighborhood Appreciation Dinner demonstrated how her ownership could serve the community while honoring Frank's legacy. The event also became a moment of reconciliation with her father, who attended and began to understand what Allison had accomplished. 6 weeks after promoting Katie to general manager, Allison sat in her Boston office reviewing quarterly reports that told a story she'd hardly dared hope for. Her tech company had not only recovered the Morrison Tech contract after a personal apology and revised proposal, but had landed 2 additional clients. Meanwhile, Grandma's Table was showing its first profit increase in 2 years. With Katie's weekend brunch menu proving especially popular with the younger demographic moving into the neighborhood, the success felt different than any she'd experienced. Before, instead of the frantic energy of trying to control everything herself, there was a steadier satisfaction in watching systems she'd helped create function without her constant intervention. Jake knocked on her office door, tablet in hand and a grin on his face. Their relationship had needed rebuilding after the Morrison debacle, but the past month had seen a return to their old collaborative rhythm. The Henderson Group just approved our proposal for their complete digital overhaul, he announced. 6 months of work, and they specifically requested that we handle their restaurant clients too. Apparently word is getting around that we understand the hospitality industry. Allison laughed. Funny how nearly ruining a business teaches you what that business actually needs. Funny how stepping back from micromanaging makes you a better consultant, Jake countered, settling into the chair across from her desk. Speaking of which, Katie called. She wants to discuss some community event idea with you. Did she say what kind of event? Something about a neighborhood appreciation dinner? She sounded excited. That afternoon, Allison drove to Millbrook. With a lightness she hadn't felt in months, the autumn landscape was spectacular, all gold and crimson against the gray November sky. And for the first time since buying the restaurant, she felt like she was visiting rather than rushing to put out fires. She found Katie in the dining room with Frank and an older black woman Allison didn't recognize. All 3 of them bent over papers spread across one of the large tables. Allison. Katie stood as she entered. Perfect timing. I want you to meet Sarah Williams. She's been helping us plan something special. Sarah extended a firm handshake and a measuring look. Ms. Parker, I've heard a lot about you from Frank and Katie, some of it even positive. Frank chuckled. Sarah runs the neighborhood association. She's been keeping an eye on us since the ownership change. Keeping an eye on you? How? Allison asked, settling into the fourth chair. Making sure you're not another developer looking to improve the neighborhood out of existence, Sarah said bluntly. We've lost 3 family businesses in the past 2 years to people who promised to preserve character while maximizing profit. The directness was refreshing after months of polite skepticism from various community members. And what's your verdict? Still deciding? But Katie's idea for this appreciation dinner has potential to show me what kind of owner you really is. Katie leaned forward eagerly. We want to host a dinner honoring the neighborhood families and businesses that have been here for decades. Free meal, no speeches about how great we are, just a chance to celebrate the community that keeps this place alive. It would be a statement, Sarah added, way of showing that you understand this restaurant exists because of the community, not the other way around. Allison looked at the planning notes spread across the table, guest lists, menu ideas, decoration concepts. The whole event would cost several $1,000s and generate no revenue. 6 months ago, she would have. Worried about the financial impact. She found herself thinking about the message it would send. When were you thinking of doing this? The Saturday before Thanksgiving, Frank said. Seemed appropriate, given the season and the history of family gatherings here. And you want to invite ... The Martinez family who've been coming. Here, since we opened. Mrs. Chen, from the corner grocery. The Johnsons, who run the hardware store. All the families who've made this neighborhood home for years. Katie's enthusiasm was infectious. Plus the businesses that have supported us, the community leaders who've kept this area strong through all the changes. Sarah studied Allison's face. The question is whether you're comfortable hosting an event that's entirely about other people. No recognition for your generosity, no publicity for your ownership, no return on investment except goodwill. It was a test, Allison realized. A chance to prove that her ownership was genuinely about stewardship rather than ego. It sounds perfect. What do you need from me? The planning took 2 weeks, and Allison found herself enjoying the collaborative process more than she'd expected. Katie handled the logistics with her usual efficiency. Frank shared stories about the families they'd be honoring, and Sarah proved to be both practical and protective, ensuring the event would feel authentic, rather than performative. The morning of the dinner, Allison arrived early to help with setup and found her father's truck in the parking lot. Inside, she discovered Rick in shirt sleeves, helping Frank arrange tables, while Carol directed the decoration of the dining room. With autumn flowers and photographs from the restaurant's history. Dad, what are you doing here? Rick looked up from the table he was positioning, his face slightly flushed with embarrassment. Katie called and said you could use extra hands. I figured. He shrugged. I figured it was time I saw what you've been building here. The evening that followed exceeded everyone's expectations. The dining room filled with 3 generations of neighborhood families, longtime customers sharing stories about birthday celebrations and anniversary dinners, children playing between tables while their grandparents reminisced about how the area had changed over the decades. Allison found herself moving through the crowd, not as the owner receiving gratitude, but as someone genuinely interested in the stories being shared. She listened to Mrs. Martinez describe her late husband's proposal at table 7. Mr. Johnson explained how Frank had let him pay for meals with hardware store credit during a difficult winter. She watched children who'd never been in the restaurant before discover the magic of Frank's famous apple pie. Midway through the evening, she noticed her father in deep conversation with Frank near the kitchen, both men gesturing with the animation of people discovering shared experiences. Later, she saw him helping Sarah Williams carry dishes to the kitchen, listening intently as she described the neighborhood association's efforts to balance growth with preservation. Your father's not what I expected, Sarah said when she found Allison refilling water glasses. What did you expect? Someone more like the developers we usually deal with? All flash and big promises. But he's been asking real questions about the community, about what we need, about how development can support rather than replace what's already here. As the evening wound down and families began to leave, Allison stood near the entrance accepting thanks and hugs from people who'd moved from suspicious politeness to genuine warmth over the course of the dinner. The transformation felt miraculous, not just in the community's perception of her, but in her understanding of what ownership in a place like this really meant. Frank approached as the last guests departed, his eyes bright with emotion. Betty would have loved tonight. This is what she always envisioned when we talked about the restaurant being part of the community's life. It was Katie's idea, Allison said. I just wrote the check. Katie set down her knife entirely. Allison, if you need to sell, we understand. You've already done more for this place than anyone expected, but what if I don't need to sell? What if the question isn't about money, but about what's right? For the restaurant and the community? Frank looked at her with something that might have been pride. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about setting up a structure that ensures this place can never be sold to someone, or change its fundamental character. Some kind of community ownership model that preserves what makes it special, while allowing it to remain financially viable, like a coop? Katie asked. Or a community land trust, maybe? Ash. Something that gives the neighborhood a voice in any future ownership decisions. Frank set the letter down carefully. That's a big commitment, Allison. It would mean tying up your investment permanently, limiting your options if your circumstances change. It would also mean honoring the real reason I bought this place. Not to make money, but to preserve something meaningful. Katie's eyes were bright with emotion. You'd really consider that? Giving up a chance to double your money? The money was never the point. At least it shouldn't have been. We talked for 2 hours, exploring options and implications, discussing the practicalities of community ownership structures and the legal mechanisms that could protect the restaurant's character in perpetuity. Frank shared stories of other businesses that had navigated similar transitions, while Katie outlined her vision for how the restaurant could serve the neighborhood even more effectively with community input and support. As the conversation continued, Allison felt the weight in her chest lifting, replaced by something that felt like clarity. The path forward wouldn't be simple, and it would require giving up financial opportunities that her younger self would have seized without hesitation. But it felt right in a way that the buyout offer never could. That evening, she called Sarah Williams to discuss the community land trust option. Then she called her parents to explain her decision before they heard it from someone else. Turning down a $200,000 profit? Rick's voice carried disbelief, but not disapproval. I'm choosing to make the restaurant's preservation permanent rather than temporary. I'm choosing community stewardship over individual profit. And you're sure about this? More sure than I've been about anything in a long time? Carol's voice came through the speakerphone. Your father and I are proud of you, sweetheart. This is exactly the kind of decision that shows what kind of person you've become. 3 weeks later, Allison sat in a lawyer's office with Frank, Katie, Sarah Williams, and representatives from 3 other neighborhood organizations, signing documents that would transfer ownership of Grandma's Table to a community land trust, while establishing Katie as the permanent managing partner with equity participation. The structure ensured that the restaurant would remain affordable to the community while preventing any future sale to entities that might compromise its character. Atlantic Restaurant Group was not pleased with her decision, but Allison felt nothing but relief as she watched their offer expire without response. The second Thanksgiving dinner at Grandma's Table felt different from the first. Instead of the tense family obligation that had sparked this entire journey, it was a celebration that brought together everyone who'd been part of the restaurant's transformation over the past year. The Parker family occupied their usual corner, booth, but this time they were joined by Frank and his extended family. Katie and her boyfriend, Sarah Williams, and several other neighborhood leaders. The dining room buzzed with conversation and laughter, 3 generations of families sharing stories and gratitude around tables that now officially belonged to all of them. Allison looked around the room and saw something she'd never noticed during that first difficult Thanksgiving. The restaurant had always belonged to the community. She'd simply made that ownership legal and permanent. So Rick said, cutting into his turkey, with the satisfaction of someone who'd spent the afternoon helping in the kitchen, "What's next for the Community Land Trust?" Katie grinned. "We're thinking about a Sunday farmer's market in the parking lot during the summer, and maybe cooking classes for neighborhood kids." Expanding without losing character, Frank observed approvingly, "That's the trick." Sarah raised her wine glass. To Allison, for understanding that the best kind of ownership is the kind you share. As glasses clinked around the tables and conversation resumed, Allison felt her phone buzz with a text from Jake. Saw the news about the Community Land Trust in the Globe. Brilliant move. Your 2 p.m. meeting with Henderson Group moved to 3, by the way. The message reminded her that her life still required balance between multiple commitments. But the balance felt sustainable now. Her tech company was thriving under their restructured partnership. The restaurant was secure in community hands, and she'd learned to trust others with responsibilities she'd once thought she had to handle alone. Frank appeared beside her booth with a slice of Betty's apple pie. On the house, he said with a wink. For the woman who figured out that owning something and keeping it aren't always the same thing. As Allison took her first bite of the pie that had become a symbol of everything she'd learned about legacy and stewardship, she thought about the angry young woman who'd stormed out of this restaurant exactly 1 year ago. That woman had been desperate to prove she could own something meaningful. This woman had learned that the most meaningful ownership was the kind that ensured what you valued would outlast your involvement. Outside the windows, November snow was beginning to fall, the first of the season. Inside, families lingered over, dessert and coffee, in no hurry to end an evening that felt like coming home. Katie stopped by the table as she made her rounds. "Thank you," she said simply, "for all of it. Thank you for teaching me what this place could be." "What do you mean?" "You showed me that ownership isn't about control or profit or proving anything to anyone. It's about taking care of something precious so it can take care of others." Rick looked up from his pie. "That's exactly what I was trying to tell you a year ago, you know." Allison laughed. "You know, Dad, a year ago you were trying to tell me I'd never own anything that matters. Turns out we were both wrong about what mattering looks like." "Maybe we were both learning," Rick admitted. "Maybe that's what families do. Learn together, even when they think they're arguing." As the evening wound down and families began their goodbyes, Allison sat in the warm glow of the dining room lights, surrounded by the people who'd become her chosen community. The restaurant would face new challenges, need new investments, require ongoing commitment from everyone who cared about its future. But it would endure, not because any individual owned it, but because a community had claimed it as their own. Her phone buzzed with a reminder about tomorrow's client meetings. But for once, the alert didn't create anxiety about competing priorities. Tomorrow, she would return to Boston and her other life, secure in the knowledge that Grandma's table was in exactly the right hands all of theirs. The first Thanksgiving at this restaurant had ended with her storming out, angry and hurt and determined to prove her father wrong. This second Thanksgiving ended with her helping stack chairs and wipe tables. Part of a community that had taught her the difference between owning something and belonging to it. As she turned off the lights and locked the door for the night, Allison realized she'd finally learned what her father had been trying to teach her all along. The things that matter most are the things we hold in trust for others, not the things we keep for ourselves. The for sale sign was long gone from the window, placed by a small plaque that read "Community Owned since 2024. It was a better kind of ownership than she'd ever imagined possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right? On your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.